Hello and welcome, folks. This is Chris, the Bardic DM, shortly to be alongside my co-host Josh, who is just dealing with Discord being Discord. And we are the Rambling Bards, here to cover the Heroes, and it's using the wrong one again. Heroes of Legacy. You go to all the trouble of updating the title card so it doesn't have the spelling error, and it still does. Just be a second, folks. Ooh, don't want to be messing with that one. Want to be messing with that one. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. So, Heroes of Legacy. And Heroic Legacies in as either the basis for or featuring in a role-playing campaign. So, Josh, you said you'd played in a campaign using sort of the Blood of Heroes as a basis?
I did. It was probably my first major campaign I've been in that really felt like the party was coming together as a group.
Yeah. I was going to say, before you lot decided what you wanted the interim campaign to be, I was considering doing something like that myself as our interim campaign, just because I figured there was no other way I was going to get the menagerie you lot are probably going to put together for the for the interim to come together naturally.
True.
Because, let's be fair, I'm going to be lucky if there's a core race amongst a lot of you come the next campaign.
Probably.
So, do you want to tell us a bit about the campaign first, or shall we go over sort of how you can do it sort of thing first? And what?
Let's go with how they can do it first. I'll just give them a better idea.
Okay, fair enough. So, Heroic Legacies Blood of Heroes. If you're doing it as a campaign basis, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 different ways to do it. One of which, the more obvious ones, would be the one I'm least fond of, which would be to make it a prophecy story, but if you do that, something is bound to bite you in the ass. Would you agree, or have you played in anything good that's had prophecies involved?
I honestly don't see prophecies used too much in campaigns.
Well,
it seems like it's such a hack thing.
Well, that and it's got so much air of railroad.
True. Very true.
I mean, you could do it, but as they say, it could potentially look like a hack job and/or trying to railroad players.
Plus, there's always the issue of what if you lose one of those players?
Well, depending on how far back the blood flows, that's not too much of an issue. Because if you set it back a couple hundred years or whatever, there's going to be a lot of descendants who could potentially fill the role. Then there's the other thing. Although we've said Blood of Heroes, I've chose the title Heroes of Legacy for a reason, because it doesn't have to be an actual blood relative of the hero. Prime example would be, say, a legendary hero monk who founds a school, and you have their best student being, the person who gets picked for the job. Sort of thing. Actually, that's the point. I think we should probably explain better what we're talking about, rather than just going on with different iteratives, shouldn't we?
That might help a little.
Okay, so the basic idea is that it's a way of starting the campaign where you have a legendary group of heroes in the campaign world, preferably made up rather than using a pre-published set, because that gives you a bit more flexibility. Because in all likelihood, you shouldn't be telling the party too much about the heroes before you know what kind of characters they're looking to play. Or at least I don't think so. Josh?
No, I could see that, but I could also see perhaps, at least what happened with my campaign was we actually ended up creating both our characters and the ancestors.
Oh, hadn't thought of doing it that way. I will admit that is a pretty cool way of doing it. And the next aspect is that the party get brought together normally due to something relating to their ancestors. Easiest one I can think of is a foe that they defeated but couldn't destroy, who is breaking loose. It's a classic for a reason. The unsealed evil.
We did also to give it some sort of sense of urgency as they're trying to get things done before he completely breaks free. Try to stop it.
True. Or you could also have the reason the party even know each other is because, yeah, he's got a cult of followers and they decided to try and take out the legacies of the heroes who defeated him before they could get involved, thus getting them involved.
Perfect.
That one's a fun one. The other way, if you want to be a bit of a closer timeline, if you want to do it as a bit of an odd one but could be quite amusing, you could, particularly if you're doing this as sort of a tie into your own previous campaigns, rather than it being sort of a first campaign or a break campaign, you could have it be the actual children of previous campaigns' characters. Which could be cool, could not, depends on how you want to do it, but I can imagine you'd be quite fond of playing Corlin Jr. in a future Tal'Darai campaign.
I was thinking of doing that for Eriskin's sequel.
Oh good, oh great. So, good thing I'm setting it a few centuries in the future so the god blood will be diluted.
Yeah, plus, we gotta set it at least a few centuries, that way we can at least have it diluted enough we might be able to justify different races.
That, and because we want the gods to have all ascended up into the heavens rather than still being on the mortal planes, because no, I am not letting you have both your level 20 plus god characters and your new ones bouncing about in the same plane of existence.
I don't blame you for a minute.
Oh, the things you and Anna would do at that point. I'm sure the others would come up with some bad things as well, but I'm fairly sure you and Anna would be the ones that would nearly break me. I only say nearly because you wouldn't be conjuring up a second coming of a Frali.
Well, you say that now.
And incoming Orc Blood Rager.
SMR Blood Rager, or maybe with a tint of Orc Blood.
So what, you'd take the almost pass for human racial trait and the racial heritage thing, so you would count as an Orc?
Close enough.
Either that or just use the Orc... Is there an Orc Blood Rager bloodline? I know there's a Sorcerer Orc one, but I don't know if there's a Blood Rager version, and if not, I could always convert it over. Just have to make it less broken than when I tried to convert the Tal'Darai stuff. Because that did get silly after a while. Awesome, but silly. So then there's then beyond, how you get them involved with the party, because, as I say, you've got, potentially the prophecy, potentially them just literally being brought together because by outside influence. Well, you could do another variant of the outside influence as well. You could have a benign influence trying to pull them together to get help because, well, this lot did alright. This lot's bloodline did alright last time. Maybe they'll do alright this time.
Or maybe like kind of like picture perhaps they had like an elf helper who's still alive for the campaign. He wasn't a hero like the rest of them, but maybe more like just their aide. Now he's trying to have to wrangle all their descendants.
Yeah, I'm gonna say some elf hireling who's now some grand arch sage just because of all the gear he got left behind by his old bosses. Wasn't anything. Good.
And then all the descendants come knocking, trying to get their inheritance from him.
Yeah, well, that was the next thing I was going to move on to. Ways to tie the descendants to their ancestors. Easiest way is custom loot. Let's be honest.
The campaign that I was in, we were using legacy weapons for something similar.
Oh yeah, I was gonna bring that up because one of the options you could do is give them each if say we're doing it in 5e and you've got the option to have a trinket for your class, rather than a normal trinket off the tables, you give them something that turns out to be a scaling item. A bit like the vestiges in the Tal'Dorei campaign setting.
That would be really good.
Yeah. Yes, you've got a necklace that's been passed down your family line for generations. It looks very pretty. Oh dear God, what's it doing now? Or a bracelet that turns out to be a collapsible suit of full plate or some such.
Surprise your ancestors, Iron Man.
Well, there is an item like that in Pathfinder, folding plate. It's a suit of otherwise non-magical full plate that can turn into a brooch. Or a cloak pin. It's been one of my favourite items since I saw it come out, just because of how cool it could be.
I like it too now. I just found it.
Yeah. Only problem is if you go off the standard rules, you can't then get it enchanted, so it's not as good. Sort of, you've got all that coolness, and then you make it so it's actually going to be, you know, an item you're going to throw away after a few levels because it just can't actually take the hits it needs to.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be pretty. I think it's probably gonna need to be either something really probably like really class specific, and probably just not scale. Probably not make it like traditional gear, maybe more like wondrous item.
Yeah.
Wondrous item.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, for the actual items of the ancestors, you just have to make them, you know, artifact level items.
True.
You know, if you're doing the whole, you have to go and find them in, you know, the sanctuaries or last resting places of your ancestors sort of thing. Which would give you, if you do it that way, you would also have an excuse for at least for a set number of dungeon crawls thrown into the adventure, no matter what.
Yeah, but I like that a bit. I think you'd probably like. I'm just not sure about that. That's itself, just because if they get that gear, you may not be switching that out for the rest of the campaign.
No, but well, same's true if you find out you've got a scaling item. You're not gonna, even if you do find something that could be a potential better slot filler, you don't know because it's still going to get better with leveling.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say probably maybe just make it a lot of rings, just so you can have 2 slots since you have 2 ring slots.
Yeah.
You can always have an extra.
Oh, you could do 2. Man, that'd be another way of getting people together. Have the scaling item for each party member be a ring that also has an inbuilt teleport at a certain signal to teleport them to the old party's hidden base.
That, or perhaps they were all hired by, like we were previously mentioning, the steward.
Yeah.
They go down to the Switchboard dungeon and they find those rings.
Yeah, true enough. What can I say? Part of me did like the idea of the rings, just because although admittedly it did give me an instant image to Power Rangers and the command center.
You and your Power Rangers, man.
It was one of the biggest shows when I was growing up. And besides, 6 identical rings that that teleport the heroes to their new home base? What else am I supposed to think of?
I'll go ahead and cross it off the list.
Yes. Yes. As much as I find a laugh in putting pseudo Power Rangers items in, they still drive you up the wall.
Not really. Just easier. It's just easy to make fun of.
Yeah. True enough. But I mean, and then of course there'd be, you wouldn't even necessarily have to have been that it was originally made for them either. It could have been an artifact that they found. I mean, I very much doubt that for instance, the vestiges that Vox Machina found during Critical Role are going to be associated with anyone but those characters in that particular iteration of Tal'Dorei ever again. Well, at least until someone does something bigger than defeat the elementally infused dragon that's conquered the continent. So they've probably got a long while on that one.
Yep, their legacies will be secure for now.
Yeah. So then there's the question, if we're doing that, okay, so we've got a general idea of we're going to be giving them a set type of loot, potentially multiple, because you could do a campaign where they have both the scaling item and have to go hunting for the major item at a later date.
True. Maybe they're also sort of like seeking some of that knowledge to help like reseal the big bad instead of with the items.
Yeah, using multiple artifacts as the keys to a seal would be a smart way. It would be a tough way of making it tough, particularly if you infuse part of the energy.
Worked perfectly.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I was on.
Actually, that's a thought. If you had multiple keys, multiple locks on the seal, each infused with part of the energy of the with part of the energy of the artifacts, that would be another way for the artifacts to be scaling. As each of the keys of the seal is destroyed, yes, they're in a bit more of a time crunch, but their gear's just gotten better.
Yeah, that would work well. I could see it's sort of like something like they gotta bring weapons or bring the artifacts back to their base.
Yeah.
The enemy's gonna find it at some point, so you also gotta get set up for something like they gotta fight off the siege.
Yeah. Next question is, what level would you start the campaign at? Because depending on how much you want to do, whether you want to do descendants or inheritors in the sense of apprentice or non-blood related stuff, like students and successors, that sort of thing, you might want to start higher than I'd say between level 1 and level 3. That way
I'd honestly want to suggest saying it maybe a little higher, just because you could start bringing out the bigger threats more quickly.
This is true.
I'd say maybe somewhere like 3 to 5, perhaps.
Maybe. I'm going to say, because part of my thought was, admittedly, it worked with yours as well, was for in case people wanted to be multi-class, so like, the one that popped into my head was this archmage who decided that they weren't going to teach any apprentices. They were going to leave all their knowledge in a vault with a series of clues leading to it. So basically, only if you were smart enough to figure out the clues could you go and learn the information. And then you have the person who ends up taking on the role being this little sneak thief who thought they were on to treasure and instead found the cache of magical knowledge.
Immediately starts getting levels on Arcane Trickster.
Ugh. That is part of the problem, but I was more just meaning just going sort of a level 1 rogue, level 2 wizard or something like that. But yeah, could also be someone that's already an arcane trickster. Dear God, that would be broken.
Well, I know what I'm playing.
Of course, you found joy in the Arcanist. You've always loved the Rogue, so the idea of being able to play an Arcane Stricter from the start is, of course, going to appeal to you.
True. I may just go to try and throw you for a loop and play a Paladin.
Well, it's still you playing a face, so it's still within my normal expectations for you.
I gotta give you at least some basics before you lose your mind completely.
Yeah. And of course there are other options as well I had, because I'll admit part of this was stemming from reading a lot of arcane punk stuff, so I was thinking, what if you had a world where you had Warforged? Simple answer. The Warforged was built by one of the heroes and basically only recently got activated or reactivated with a complete memory blank, so can't even remember the fact that, yeah, you know those scaling artifacts and other stuff? Yeah, they're built in. Rather than being something they have to find. It's more, no, you don't have to find them, you just have to figure out how they work.
I like that one quite a bit.
Yeah, it could be quite fun, particularly depending on what class the Warforged was. Because I'll admit, have you seen the People of the Wastes Brawler archetype? You know, the one with the customizable robotic arm?
I am not.
Well, yeah, there's an archetype in People of the Waste, it's on Archive of Nethys now, which basically gives the Brawler a robotic arm that they can customize and enchant as they level. And unlike anything else, it counts as a martial weapon, so they can get the impact enchantment on it.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah, that's just funny. It's sort of, yes, I have monk scaling with this metal fist. By the way, it, unlike any other monk, can get impact.
Plus, I'm also a Minotaur, so I'm already large.
I wasn't going that far, but I wouldn't. But I'm guessing you're thinking of your Eberron campaign and how that would be snapped up immediately for that sort of thing.
Oh, definitely.
Are you now going to be telling your? Is the Minotaur a monk in your campaign?
Yes, he is. He's also sworn an oath of truth, so it's even more interesting.
Yeah, well, you might want to let him know about the archetype, and then maybe you'll consider multi-classing.
He actually has been considering that, but he's actually also thinking of going to a psionic class.
Oh god, a psionic Minotaur monk.
Plus, there's that feat, what is it called, like Deep Impact? Expend your focus, get a free touch attack.
Oh, bloody hell. And I pity your GM, I really do.
It's even worse considering I'm also currently nearing the point where I'm going to be finishing my advanced firearm, so I'm going to have a lever-action Winchester-style rifle with 240-foot range and making touch attacks.
Yeah, that's broken. Funny, but broken.
It's still probably only a touch attack for the first section, but I still got all the rest of the range without any penalty.
Well, it's the first range increment, so what's its range increment?
It's 80-foot range increment, but I've also got a scope that's basically negating the negatives to shooting past the second and third range increments.
So yeah, it's only at so it's only for the first 80 feet, but the first 80 feet, but anything that gets within 80 feet of you is dead.
Now just imagine if I got the distance enchantment on it.
Oh dear god, 160 feet of touch attacks. Dear god. And 480 foot range? Ooh, that'd be nasty. Well, as I was going to say, I was thinking for Warforged you could do something like that, only for a gunslinger where they've got a gun built into their arm and can customize it as it levels.
Man, I was in one campaign with an android gunslinger.
Yeah.
He was considering taking this archetype that would give him multiple arms. So basically, he was going to have a musket and 2 tower shields on him.
That's one hell of a one-man riot squad.
The thing thankfully, he seemed to reconsider the archetypes. It's at least for him, it seems suboptimal.
Well, I suppose the tower shields wouldn't stack, so that's one thing.
Perhaps it's been too long. I barely remember why I decided otherwise.
Fair enough. So, okay, so now we get on to the potential ancestors sort of thing. Let's discuss that, because you said you created both, right?
Yes, we did.
So, can you remember any of them that stood out?
Well, one of the players had a very interesting one. She was a silver dragonborn. Her ancestor was the actual dragon.
Okay. Yes. So how did that tie into the other heroes of the group? Did she go under in disguise, or?
No, actually, she ended up she was originally a human, and at least in our setting, she was a human, and she ended up in a campaign transforming into Silver Dragonborn.
No, I was meaning with the Silver Dragon ancestor when she was part of the heroes. Did she go in disguise, or was that just an accepted aspect?
It was accepted.
Okay, cool. So that would mean that so this was back in 3.5, was it? Where they had the whole traditional Bahamut transformation Dragonborn, or?
Yes, I believe so.
Ah, right. Yeah, that was always.
Yeah, she was a follower of Bahamut.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I've got the book somewhere that had the rules for that ritual. It was such a pain in the arse as written.
That's probably why the DM just hand-waved it and basically led her to the transformation.
Yeah, because you basically have to build a giant egg.
I think in our campaign she just ended up forming one naturally, like it was a part of her maturing.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact details, but I think you had to build a giant egg, which, yeah, that'd be a fun thing to do, wouldn't it? Particularly considering it was using the old 3.5 crafting rules, and you had to pay experience and all that.
Well, that was always the worst part of that system.
Yeah. Happiest thing I ever saw when I first opened Pathfinder was no spending experience to craft items and no experience penalty when multi-classing.
You immediately knew your favorite system.
Well, it was something similar to 3.5, and it didn't have a lot of the punishment for trying to customize your character, so yeah. Unlike the current iteration, from what I've seen so far of the next iteration, where character customization seems to be the antithesis of what Paizo are looking for.
I've been avoiding Pathfinder 2nd Edition just because I'm already so out of it with it.
I need to download the latest iteration. I don't know what the changes are, so I can't comment further than that. I just know from the first version it was basically the only way it used, basically instead of having proper multiclassing, it only had the variant multiclassing from Unchained.
I so very rarely multi-class. I have no clue what you're talking about.
Oh, variant multiclassing in Unchained and what they do in Pathfinder is basically, instead of actually multiclassing, you just basically swap out specific abilities for abilities from the other class that you would be variant multiclassing as.
That sounds like it could be horribly broken.
Apart from you can only variant multiclass as one other class. You cannot just pick and choose. You have to, once you pick one, you have to pick it at first level, and you're stuck with it.
Yeah, but with something like Rogue, you can swap out something like Trap Finding. I still think that could be pretty bad.
I don't think you got to pick what it was you swapped out. I think it was a predetermined list sort of thing. It's sort of like archetypes.
Yeah, okay, that's better then.
But it was the easiest way to get scaling sneak attack on other classes. I think you swapped out stuff for, I think like Fighter could swap out some of its bonus feats, or either that or its weapon training for sneak attack.
Ooh, that's nasty.
Yeah, Fighter with sneak attack. have all the weapon versatility in the world, and I have a maximum of 5d6 of sneak attack damage. And now I go into the Vital Strike build. Then again, I suppose that's basically Slayer, only without the tracking benefits then, isn't it? But
True, those significantly scaled down.
right. So we've got... So just to ask, what kind of... So with this sort of campaign, as I say, for the Ancestors, if we're not letting people create them on their own, and you're not creating them custom, how would you do for generic hero group? You know, what sort of general archetype would you say we should have?
Honestly, probably just consider perhaps generally just the core 5: tank, DPS, actually no 6 ranged, healer, magic, jack of all trades.
I was going to say, I was thinking if we're going to go in terms of, you know, say we're doing it for Pathfinder, I would say we would probably have a fighter, because that's, you know, covers the basis for most of the martials. Or you could go... I suppose if you're going... You might also want to, depending on the campaign, you might also want a monk in there, because the monk could give things like the ninja a reason to exist as well, depending on how it's done. You know, for all the different key manipulations and all that.
That can work. Maybe something like Inquisitor for range, just because it has that mix of sort of divine and nature based.
Yeah, maybe. It would be hard to pick. I'd say Arcanist for the arcane, and to those who to our one viewer, yes, I'm a massive advocate for the Arcanist, just because it's that midway between sorcerer and wizard, so it does explain how the others have sort of emerged from it. If you wanted to have someone playing a witch or something like that, you could maybe have the ghost of the hero being their patron or something like that.
That could work well, and also I think I'm the one viewer, so I think I'd pretty much have to agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm keeping an eye on the stream chat.
Fair enough, thanks, man. Yeah, well, suppose it was a bit late letting people know and all that, but oh well. Hopefully we'll get a few views on YouTube.
I think we maybe just tell Pine to maybe start putting stuff. You and Pine start putting stuff out, maybe like periodically throughout the day. Maybe like put something early before stream.
Yeah, I suppose the main reason I haven't done is just in case in case of things where we might not be able to stream or whatever. That today has been a bit distracting. But yeah, I'll try and keep that in mind. Yeah, say another option for the base divine would either be, for the healer would be either a druid or a cleric, because cleric gives you war priest and potentially oracle as well.
Yeah, but maybe if
actually might be better to have an oracle, because that's not inherently tied to a god.
Sure, that'll work pretty well.
Maybe have someone that's sort of risen to sort of posthumous sainthood sort of thing and develop their own sort of mini following. For sort of those philosophical clerics rather than outright deity clerics.
I thought of a class I think that would be pretty perfect for the jack of all trades, but it's more we could probably need to convert a 3.5 class. Do you know the Factorum class?
It's ringing a bell, but I can't remember from where. Let me just double check whether I've got what book's it from.
1 second. They basically at later levels get the ability to replicate other class abilities.
Oh, that's not broken, not at all.
It's a really high level ability. You also get basically a set number of spells that you basically give yourself. Select spell-like abilities you can have for yourself.
Okay, yeah, this... Oh dear God, I'm glad they never converted this over, because I can only see one way of this going. Right into the Evangelist Prestige class.
Oh God.
You are seeing the cheese now?
No, definitely. This was actually a class I played in the Legacy of Heroes campaign.
Ah. So, what book's it from?
Dungeonscape.
I don't think I have that one. I'll have to try and find PDF later.
Dungeonscape variant, page 14.
Cool.
Probably one of my favorite bits was in that campaign. They have this thing called opportunistic piety, so that basically they could rotate clerical abilities, but they could basically choose any deity they want depending on the situation. We were in a room where we had some sort of corruption throughout. Everyone's holy symbol was broken. I basically pulled a keychain of holy symbols out of my bag.
Oh, keychain of holy symbols. That's a new one. Was that an actual item, or just something, or just a collection you picked up over time?
It was just a collection I had over time.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the big thing with that campaign is we had started pretty typically. We were bodyguards for a caravan heading into a small town. We found the town being sacked by people. Actually, no, we hadn't been sacked yet. They were facing kidnappings. We basically splashed the monk with booze, laid her out in the field, basically just watched her, like for people to try and nab her, since she would have no problem being able to fight them off.
Oh.
Using her as bait.
Yeah, drunken master monk by any chance?
Not that far. She did, however, have the oath of poverty.
Oh, right. I can't remember what that does, but I know it was nasty.
It was. You can't use any magic items at all, but the abilities it does give you completely cancels it out.
Ah, yes. So, someone tries to nab her and then ends up being turned into a human pretzel?
At least one of them was. We managed to capture two of them, but suddenly two heavy crossbow bolts just jolted out from the woods and killed both of them before we could start asking questions. We run out to the woods, and all I find was this old man with a raven familiar. Actually, yeah, it was a raven familiar. We questioned him. He seemed a bit odd, but he did try to help us. So at least some of us mostly laid them off.
Hmm.
Later, after we had gone out sacking one of the bases, we come back. The town had been completely besieged, and most of the people had been killed and driven back.
Hmm.
We were going around trying to push the cultists back, gathering supplies. We went to the old man's house. We were looking around, searching it. We found a chest in the basement. The ranger and the paladin start debating whether or not we should open it. I was a text user at the time while they were using voice, so I just got busy actually picking the lock while they were debating it. I was listening to them. The lock drops. As we open it, we find the old man's body, sealed away. The big bad and his right-hand man had been hidden in disguise as the old man, the Raven familiar, had been helping us out for the last month.
Oh, that's... yeah, that's good.
We come back, we find most of the people dead, and the retired Dwarven Avenger completely annihilated. It was adamantine full plate ripped apart.
Yikes.
The character... He was a change. The main villain was a changeling, and his Raven familiar was actually a Raptoran. He was using some insane mobile flying archer archetype.
Oh, that's nasty. Well, it could have been worse. I was expecting it to be a full-on evil doppelganger.
I think he was pretty much at that point.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm gonna say, because was this another Eberron set one or a custom setting?
This was custom.
Ah, Hence why you've got Raptoran and Changelings in the same setting.
Yeah. One weird thing about that campaign is I think I don't think we got maybe like half a dozen names from the GM just because we never remembered to ask for names and he never gave them out.
Yeah. One reason I always have I usually have names ready for unless someone's picks up a completely random NPC and then I get sort of
Yeah.
I have neither token nor name ready for this because you've just grabbed somebody out of the crowd and I do not have the time or patience to put together a list of every single citizen in the game.
Yep. True.
I think if I did, I think I'd probably be seeking professional help.
I'd be heading up to the UK with a straitjacket to help you there.
Yeah. Word of warning to anyone who ends up watching this in the future. Yeah, if you feel the compulsion to write down the names for every NPC that could possibly be encountered, it's probably time to step away from the GM chair for a while. The pressure and the munchkining of your players is getting to you.
Oh, and the creepy part with the changeling and his buddy. The only reason he didn't kill us was because apparently he had orders from someone even worse, saying he had to stop. He couldn't kill them.
Okay, that's just what you want to find out. Yeah, the big bad. Yeah, he's a middleman.
But actually, yeah, no, I remember what he was. He was a herald.
That would imply something god tier was after your collective arses.
Yep, I think so. Sadly, we didn't get that far to really confront him.
Always the way.
This was also the campaign where you remember the story. It was basically, this is the guy who gave us all necklaces to supposedly help us. Then 20 sessions later, my character never remembered to take his off. It started getting corruption.
Ah.
Yeah. Then he pretty much asked the monk, the Dragonborn. Basically, if he completely transform, if he can't be saved, she has his permission to break his neck.
That's fair enough. I'm gonna say I do quite like having corruption elements in campaigns. It's always quite interesting.
Me too, especially when players don't know it's in there in the first place.
Yeah, although I will say, not so much the Pathfinder Horror Adventures version of corruption, although that could be fun in its own right.
True.
I've always been tempted, if I ever run a game with corruption involved, that I would say that certain races and classes or certain race and class combinations might start with corruptions. Like, if you're playing Tiefling, yeah, you start with one of the infernal corruptions.
That would be fun.
You get both the benefit and the negative, but it seems fair, and it would.
Yeah, it does.
And same for like specific bloodlines of sorcerer or blood rager. If there's an affiliated corruption, yeah, and you've got that bloodline, yeah, it's manifesting in that fashion.
And I just remembered something else about in the later part of the campaign. We ended up having to replace about half the party. We at least tried to keep it going.
Yeah.
The Jotun Paragon class, we ended up switching to Pathfinder.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I know the feeling of the rotating wheel of players. It drives you up the wall.
No, it does.
Maybe.
We had an amazing group, but it all just seemed to fall apart on half the party at once.
Ouch. Yeah,
We
well,
lost an Arcane Archer, Relf, Dragon Disciple, Dragonborn, and our Orc Ranger, Scout, and Rogue.
oh, yeah, that would be rough. I say, because both my Saturday campaign had it, and obviously we had it a little bit in the Tal'Darai campaign. Not as much, thankfully, but we did have it a little bit.
Yeah, towards the end. Next time will be better.
Yeah. I think I had in total, in the Saturday game, the one that you joined and really weren't a fan of, I think I probably had 14 players throughout the 18 months.
Oh.
and only 2 of them were still there from the beginning.
Well, that's rough.
Yeah. Might have been slightly less, but I know I got into the double digits.
Considering how much the 2 players are arguing, I believe it.
That was more just a very recent thing. Didn't really kick in till I think around midway through book 5. And I think at that point it was just, combination of the rolling wheel and, clashing personalities that both didn't want to give up on the game. Which I can respect, to be honest. Right. So, the woes of my previous Saturday campaign aside, any other sort of iterations you could maybe do? I mean, you brought up something that for the sequel campaign that we do for the sequel to Forging the New Gods when we do it. That'd be another option you could do. You could actually have an entire party of sort of demigods or incumbent demigods that have been called together to deal with something that the gods have been forbidden, due to some deal or whatever with the devil, or some agreement between the powers that they're not allowed to act directly. Oh, Junior!
Maybe they don't even know, and they just suddenly find themselves empowered.
Well, it'd be a good way of doing a Heroes of Legacy campaign that uses the Pathfinder Mythic system. Oh, that could be quite funny. Child of a god who is a cleric who is not a follower of that god.
Oh, that would be nasty. Also, I'm picturing something like, I don't know, something like they're all like 15 years old and they all suddenly find themselves with 10 class levels.
No, I wouldn't do that just because, dear God, that is asking for a pain in the arse. Because some people would purposely play the most dickish teenager they could. Which, to be fair, would be accurate. Teenagers are in general gits.
Oh, definitely.
But it would not make for a fun campaign.
No, it would not.
Oh.
I can't take credit for this idea, but one idea perhaps may be a good idea is maybe like the approach, or I know that may be going too far, depending on how far you want it to sort of affect their backstory is.
Oh.
Perhaps like starting a campaign when they're young as kids and discovering their powers and just doing like the first 2 seconds, first couple sessions. You can skip a couple of years as they slowly gain and figure out their abilities and powers.
Potentially, but at the same time, if the party was all in for it, maybe, and only if I could get the right story, for it, for the potential campaign. Because I don't know if that could get a bit too heavy on the railroading. Not intentionally, just because of how you've shaped the campaign and all that.
Yeah, true, fair enough.
I'm not saying it definitely would, but I'm just saying it would probably take a party that knows each other, a group that's had a good couple of years together, sort of thing.
Agreed. Like the reason, like Xander, Xander, our buddy Xander, one of the former Tal'Dorei players.
Yes.
He's giving a Gestalt campaign a try, and he's pretty much doing it with only trusted players for that exact reason.
Well, that and because of how often he's been burned. I mean, dear God, that guy, he's a great bloke, but dear God, his luck with campaigns.
Yeah, he ever tell you about Josh? Well, the other Josh?
I don't know, is that the more... Potentially, if it's one of his shit GMs, quite probably, because he's told me more stories that have made me want to come over to the US and find people claiming to have the title of DM and kick their heads in than anybody else has.
Oh, actually, I think I may have told you about him. Remember the druid who basically took over the entire conversation when we were in a Tal'Dorei game and we met Keyleth?
Oh, yes, vaguely. I think you only mentioned it once, and this was sometime last year. I think you mentioned it. So, Yeah, I can't remember the details, but yeah, I remember cringing a fair bit.
Surprisingly, Xander's still putting up with them.
If I ever get the money to come to the US, I think I'm just going to have to find Xander and have him introduce me to various people and do my bouncer routine.
Come on, man, you don't want to go to the US prisons. It's not, even if it is, it's not worth it. At least unless you really make them pay.
That would imply that I'm going to. That would imply that there'll A, be witnesses and B, be evidence.
Fair enough.
I'm good at. I was going to say I know far too much about disposing of bodies to actually get caught.
Like gonna feed them to pigs?
Yeah, either that or dissolve them in rhubarb.
Okay, the rhubarb is a new one.
Yeah, if you mash up raw rhubarb and particularly the leaves, it's got oxalic acid that releases, can completely dissolve the flesh and bones. Makes them virtually unidentifiable.
Now, audience, if you don't say you heard this from us.
So far, we've got no audience.
This is okay. This is for when people eventually do watch this.
Oh, to be fair, I learned this off watching Bones.
Fair enough.
They used diluted rhubarb to strip a corpse. And the bones apparently went very soft, and if they'd left them much longer, apparently it would have. I mean, I've double checked, but yeah, it does work. Basically, the acid breaks down the connection between the flesh, and eventually, if you leave it long enough, the bones as well. That's the worrying thing. You know, as much as people say it's weird that people know this amount of stuff, it's like, have you seen how popular CSI and other stuff like that is for TV shows? Of course people know how it works. Most of them actually have accurate ways of body disposal.
True. I doubted it just because I remember I actually used to be a fan of Mythbusters. They were testing dissolving a body with hydrochloric acid.
Yeah.
It didn't work as well as people thought.
Yeah, to be fair, you needed to use a lot.
And they did.
Yeah, and I would also say that oxalic acid reacts differently. I mean, oxalic acid, it will... Same reason why you should never eat rhubarb leaves. Even a small amount will kill you.
People wonder why I'm a picky eater.
To be fair, no one is going to... If someone's trying to serve you rhubarb leaves, then you should be suspicious. But if they're trying to serve you just regular rhubarb, nah, it's fine.
I don't trust anyone anyway.
Well, yeah, me neither. I was going to say, being a geek in secondary school, or high school as you Yanks call it, yeah, that'll do it to you. And most of your class get gank happy, in varying degrees of literal sense. Yeah, tends to breed rampant paranoia.
And this is why I'm glad I was a hermit in high school.
Yeah, I can understand that. But childhood trauma that's led to a rampant paranoia aside. So what kind of villain would you say for this if you're doing the whole, incumbent villain with, sealed villain with cult? Josh, you there, man?
I know. I'm here. I was just debating the idea. I know the typical answer is some sort of demon or devil. I may want to do something sort of like a conqueror worm, something like that.
Oh, I love the Conqueror worm since they introduced it. It's such a badass monster.
I thought you'd be a fan of it.
It's all about mind control, manipulation, and whispers. Of course I am. It's the ultimate. It's as close as we're going to get to a beholder or mind flayer in Pathfinder.
True.
Another option, of course, would be, if you want to go for one of the other classics, would be a Lich. Or Death Knight. It's been sealed away.
Yeah, but that stuff has been done to death.
True. Or if you want to do a silly version, you can find the right art. If you go in with our artifact, with our scaling item rings option for the Power Rangers aesthetic, you could do a version of Ivan Ooze. Just do it as.
Take away your GM card for a little bit, Chris.
Well, it'd just be a slime version of a Lich, a wizard who has managed to gain immortality by turning himself into an ooze.
I was watching a forum-based D&D campaign bit, even though I'm not usually big on play-by-post stuff kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the players wanted to basically recreate Skeletor as a Lich.
I'd actually say he isn't. If you go into the backstory of him, he's more of a Death Knight with an artifact staff.
And now we show our age to the audience.
Well, that's not even age. I mean, that's me going off the stuff that they established better in the 2003 version of He-Man.
At this point, that's not much of a difference.
It's a good 20 years difference.
Not on the internet, man. You're old, may as well be 30.
Well, I'm 26. I'm most of the way there.
You are not as older. You're not as much older than I am. You're not as much older than I am than I thought. Well, I'm only 25 this week.
Mine was. Oh, well, happy birthday then, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send another one when it pops up on social media as a reminder, but I'm terrible remembering dates. For that sort of thing.
Not a problem, man. It's not going to be a campaign day anyway. It's on Tuesday.
Oh, right. Well, hope you have a good time. Whatever you do.
Honestly, at this point, all I want is to get a job, and I really just want this. I just really want this cake. I've been dying to have since I found this cake company. There's this cake company called Nothing But Cakes, and it's all bundt cakes.
So
I'm
think.
getting a red velvet bundt cake that has chocolate chips scattered throughout it.
Not my thing, but I can definitely see the appeal.
You're dead to me.
My taste in cake is always going to have me dead to Americans. I like fruitcake.
Well, Chris, you just got one more. You just got an opening in your campaign.
You haven't tried my Nana's recipe.
Yeah, I know. I'm obsessed with cooking shows, trying to become a chef.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And basically, I always see your bud cake can be done. Fruit cake can be done really well.
Yeah, it's just from what I've seen of the American versions that go in the shops, they're an insult to the bloody name. Right, we've gotten thoroughly off topic, but and it's mostly time to wrap up. So this will be going up on YouTube hopefully tomorrow, if it doesn't give me the 16-hour upload time it gave me on the last episode of Forging the New Gods. And if you have any suggestions for show topics or anything like that, feel free to post them in the Seekers of Legend Facebook group, which you can find through the link here on the Twitch channel, or in the comments on YouTube at YouTube/BardicDM. Take care, folks, and we will see you on Sunday, and hopefully next week, where we should be discussing the Final Fantasy D20 website's classes and other potential material. Bye for now.
Later.